This tutorial is in two parts really. One is to paint a lovely sort of floral loose watercolour, but I'm going to use that finished painting to create a personal low cost Christmas present. So it's a Christmas present idea and you can actually post it with your Christmas card. So let's get started. I'm using some watercolour paper here. It's got some washi tape around the edge. I've wet the paper. I've mixed up some opera rose. You can use permanent rose. I'm just going to paint some pretty cosmos flowers using my size 10 round brush here. I'm painting a sky to begin with, and this painting is completely out of my imagination. So for a full list of all the materials I'm using, please see the description below. Just click more. So I've mixed up some cerulean here and I'm painting the sky wet in wet. Just getting a little bit more cerulean and leaving sort of gaps for the clouds as well. So I've loaded my brush with some opera rose and I'm painting the petals wet in wet here. Just going to let the painting tilt a little, get everything moving. I added a little bit more of ultramarine at the top to make the sky a little bit darker to create depth in my painting. That's all wet in wet. So I've mixed up slightly creamier opera rose with some permanent rose, and I'm painting this sort of damp into wet. So the surface is still wet, but the paint is slightly thicker. So I've rinsed off my brush there. I've just mixed up a very pale ultramarine. I'm painting it in the gaps between the flowers, wet into wet there. Rinsed off my brush again and I'm mixing up now some green. So I'm using some yellow, cadmium yellow with some Prussian blue. It's quite a yellow green, and I'm painting some leaves and stems damp into wet. Again, the paint is slightly thicker here. And what happens then, the paint doesn't run as much, so you've got these soft sort of edged leaves, etc. I've added some quinacridone gold. You could use raw sienna, nice sort of natural golden colour. I'm tilting and sort of painting here, damp into damp. I've added a little bit of that ultramarine to the quinacridone gold to make a darker green. Don't worry if you don't have quinacridone gold, you could just use the yellow, painting damp into damp. So I'm mixing up here some magenta to make a darker pink. Again, you could use something like alizarin crimson, and a little bit more of that opera rose. So painting damp into damp now, some more petals to make slightly stronger, darker petals. With the opera rose, again, you could use permanent rose. So I'm doing this very loosely. I'm painting a little bit of pink into these sort of yellow leaves there. And I'm spattering some of the opera rose damp into the foreground. I've mixed up a little bit more of the ultramarine and quinacridone gold, taken the excess paint off there as you saw on my paper towel, so that makes sure that your brush is damp. And I'm just painting some of the buds and seed heads here damp into damp with my size 10 brush, keeping everything really random. And again, because I don't have a photograph, I have this freedom to kind of experiment as well. So I'm just painting some darker marks here in the foreground, varying the size as well. I'm also painting some of the dark green underneath the flowers there, using the tip of my brush, still using the ultramarine and quinacridone gold. So I'm using a cocktail stick here. You can use the corner of a tube of paint, and I'm just sort of scratching into the damp surface to create some spiky marks on the foliage there. It is permanent. What happens is the paint runs into the scratch to create a darker mark, but you're also sort of drawing out the paint as well to create those spikes. So I'm going to give my painting a spatter in the foreground using some of that green there. I'm using my size 6 brush. I've just mixed up a little bit more of the Quin gold and the ultramarine, slightly darker, and just spattering onto the damp surface there. Lots of textured marks. So I'm going in now, painting damp into damp with the opera rose using my size 6 brush, just painting these darker marks. If your paint runs too much, just wipe off the brush onto a paper towel so it can control the moisture and the paint that goes onto the painting. So these are kind of more definite marks, but they still have soft edges. So I'm just sort of painting now, just again damp into damp, using my size 10 brush, just painting in just sort of more sort of those darker petals here and there. And what I'm doing now is I'm actually lifting off some of the light on the petals using a clean, damp brush to create lighter areas on the petals. So remember to rinse your brush and take the excess water off and then lift off. So I'm just using a liner brush here. You can use a small round brush and just painting in some of the thin stems there. You can even use a twig. Using a light green, could use cadmium yellow and ultramarine. Working damp into damp. I'm going to use some sea salt here. I'm going to sprinkle it onto the damp surface, and I'm going to allow my painting to dry naturally to give the salt a chance to work. Once it's dry, just rub off the salt with a paper towel. As you can see, it's left some lovely light textures, especially on some of the petals. I'm going to use the Pigma Micron drawing pen here, and I'm just going to draw sort of an outline around each of the main sort of flowers here, just to give them shape. You don't have to do this. You could actually just build up a little bit more while you're painting in your watercolour, but I thought it'd be quite nice to use a little bit of line and wash. So I'm just painting some darker petals in, really just with the Opera Rose with a touch of the magenta, just to darken it up. You can even add a little bit of red if you want to, and it's all wet on dry. It's all quite random, kind of keeping a lot of the dark sort of underneath the petals there. And I always just keep loading my brush with fresh paint, trying to keep lots of light as well. And I would sort of say vary your pinks, maybe some more sort of with the Opera Rose, some more with permanent rose, even alizarin crimson. So I've actually added a little bit of ultramarine in my pink there, and this sort of more of a dark pink colour, and just painting damp into damp just to create some shadows on those petals there. And I'm just using water now to dilute some of those petals to create more light, especially at the top part of the flowers. I'm just mixed a dark green there, that's the ultramarine with a touch of the quinacridone gold, and just adding a few more dark accents here and there, again especially underneath where there's not as much light getting to the foliage or the flowers. So just a little tickle of paint here and there using my size 10 round brush. And I'm just painting some stems in now, here and there, using a slightly lighter green, a little bit more yellow, less blue, all pretty much wet on dry. They're very sort of thin leaves and you don't have to put too much. And I'm using my size 2 round brush just to add this detail in here and there. Just adding a few more darks and details here, a few more sort of darks on the stems and the leaves, still using my size 2 brush. And I'm just going to spatter a little bit of pink in the foreground and a little bit on top of the flowers as well. It just stops me from overworking, just mixing up a touch more that Opera Rose and just giving it a spatter. You don't have to do this, it's just something I love to do. And I'm adding a touch of pink on top of some of those buds there, so it looks like the pink is coming through. And I'm just going to soften that there with a clean damp brush just to sort of blend that a little bit there. And I'm also going to show you, if you do lose your light, you can actually lift off as well by using a clean damp brush and some paper towel, and lift off to create more light on your petals. I thought it'd be quite nice just to add a very dilute pink in the foreground as well, just to create some colour harmony and bring everything together. I've added a touch of ultramarine to that pink as well, just to create a darker pink, and I'm just painting this wet on dry in the foreground. So I'm removing my washi tape. It reveals a really nice white border, and you can leave your painting here as a complete painting. I'm quite pleased with it. It's a nice loose painting. It's great just painting from the imagination, one of my favourite flowers. So I'm going to show you how now to turn this into this really cool Christmas present. So I'm using a clear phone case cover. Just make sure it fits the size of the phone of the person you're sending it to. So here's the phone case cover here, and I'm just trying to find out the best picture. There could be a couple, but I just want to find the best sort of composition here. So might go for this one. It's quite nice actually to do this, you know, just trying to see what works best. And also this is a really nice way of sort of creating cards or bookmarks as well. So I'm just drawing around it now. I've decided on this area here. So I'm using an HB pencil, just drawing roughly around the phone case. And I'm just going to trim that again outside of that area to make sure that I don't over trim and it's too small for the phone case. Wouldn't want to do that. Now I know a lot of you are going to be shocked by this, but this was a quickie painting, and to make yourself feel better, use the back of an old painting or something like that, so you don't get too terrified about cutting up your work. But as I said, you can actually make these into cards and bookmarks as well. So I'm just using my paper trimmer here just to trim around the outside edge of the pencil mark, so just slightly bigger. So I think this would make a lovely bookmark, and this as well. Another great present idea. So I'm just actually now carefully sort of drawing it around the phone case here onto the back of the watercolour paper, and I'm trimming with my scissors here as well. Just be careful of any sharp objects, and just sort of trimming the curve there very carefully. And I'm just now drawing the sort of camera hole here and then trimming it with a craft knife. Just be really careful of your fingers. Keep your fingers away from the cutting area. Just take your time doing this. And as you can see, I'm just using that pencil line as a guide. And I'm using a cutting mat underneath as well. So I'm going to put the cover now into the plastic cover, and I'm really pleased with it. It makes a really pretty cover actually. So I'm now going to pop my phone in just to show you the whole thing. Just slot that in, and there we are. Works really well. Can have so many ideas for this as well. So I'm going to post the phone cover painting in this Christmas card that I made from a print from a larger painting here. It's a line and wash, and this is one of my exclusive tutorials available on my Patreon membership. And if you're interested in getting access to my weekly exclusive tutorials, you will find more details about the membership in the description below. Remember, just click more. I thought it'd be really nice just to write a little personal note just on the back of the painting here, the phone cover. And I'm just going to slot this inside the card so it fits perfectly and ready for posting. And I'm just putting it in the envelope that came with the set of cards that I purchased. And if you want to send the cover with the actual case, you may need to send that in a small parcel. I really hope you found this idea inspiring, just making this simple sort of design for a phone case. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section. And if you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel where you'll get updates of my latest tutorials. And if you want to get access to those exclusive weekly tutorials, why not think about joining my Patreon membership. Details about the membership can be found in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.